Krishnan is renowned for advocating the use of the power of education for the upliftment of the downtrodden and economically underprivileged. Felicitating this legend and speaking on the topic, Growth of University System and Economics of Education in India, will be Professor Prakash, former chairman of UGC. He is a great educationist and has served the cause of education for over 40 years. He is a recipient of the Fulbright postdoctoral fellowship. He is a visiting faculty at the University of Windsor, Canada, and a guest faculty at HIID Harvard University. He is also the founder, Vice Chancellor of the National University of Educational Planning and Administration. A versatile thinker and prolific researcher, he has authored over 100 publications. I humbly request Professor Prakash to speak on the topic, Growth of University System and Economics of Education in India.
Krishnan, members of the family of Professor Krishnan, my senior colleagues from the university fraternity, invited guests, ladies and gentlemen. It's indeed a very auspicious occasion for all of us who have assembled today here to celebrate 90th birthday of our leader, Professor Krishnan. I have come especially to receive his blessings. I have long association with Professor Krishnan spanning over 2.5 decades. And during that association, I have been deeply impressed by the range of his knowledge and ideas and his personal qualities. Professor Krishnan, everyone knows, is a very broad-minded, very natural and dignified, truthful, has the courage to speak his own mind very valiantly. And he continues to be a source of great inspiration for all of us. I would like to take only a minute to share one of my very unique experiences with Professor Krishnan in the city of Washington. I had gone there as a member of a delegation to a very important office. I'm not going to name, that. He came to know about our visit, and he reached there because he was already visiting his family in US. And before the commencement of the meeting, he took me aside and he said, Prakash, I have come to know that there are some people who have been lobbying for massive privatization of higher education in India. And we are not yet ready as a nation to go in for that kind of massive privatization of higher education because we are a developing economy and we still need to recognize higher education as a public good and not as a private good. He didn't stop there. He also gave me very fine points to support the idea in favor of higher education as a public good, which speaks about the quality of his mind and love for the nation state. There are many more instances. Some are such that I cannot share with you when we would be traveling together and the way we would be spending the evenings together in the hotel and in the guest houses. He is indeed a celebrated academician who has been in the forefront of numerous reforms, both in the sectors of technical higher education and general higher education. He would always be remembered as a truthful person known for speaking his mind. He continues to be a great source of inspiration for all of us, and I have admired him for over decades. And with the same respect, sir, and admiration, I wish you today very many happy returns of the day. And pray to the Almighty to give you long life and great health. Like my previous speaker had said, that we would like to assemble here again after a decade to celebrate your birthday. With this, let me come to the topic that has been assigned to me, the growth of the university system and economics of education, and I'll be very brief. I will try to complete it within the time allotted to me. We all know that universities are the most enduring organizations in the history of the world because they are the organizations which have shown the way to the society and taken the society to the next stage of development. And if we look into the history of the Indian higher education, we find that institution of higher learning of modern India owe very little to our ancient and medieval centers of learning. But we should not forget the very existence of those premier institutions like Takshila, Nalanda, and Vikramshila. Modern period of higher education can be traced back to 1781, which started off from the city of Calcutta, where people of creditable reputation approached the then Governor General Warren Hastings and requested him to articulate a policy on education, because we did not have any policy on education. Nothing happened for 29 long years. And then this group of illustrious people, our leaders of those eras, they got together and they decided to set up the colleges on their own. And the first college which was established in 1817 was Hindu College in Calcutta, which subsequently became the Presidency College and now the Presidency University. And then the leaders of this great country, they set up such institutions throughout the length and breadth of the country. The number was not very large. We set up Pune College in 1833, Elphinstone College, Bombay in 1834, Hooghly College 36, Agra College 39, Patna College 40, and Madras Christian College in 1852. And I was trying to look into the background of these institutions, how they were operating and what kinds of programs were they offering at that point in time. They were fully autonomous institutions. And they were not awarding the degrees and diplomas. They were only awarding completion certificate, finishing certificate, and those certificates were good enough to go to Oxford, Cambridge, Harvard, and pursue higher education. For 73 long years, we again did not have any policy on education in our country. Then came Wood's Dispatch in 1854, and he made long recommendations running into more than 100 paragraphs. Of them, one vital recommendation was to set up 3 universities in the port cities of Calcutta, Bombay, and Madras. And then in 1857, these 3 universities came up, and the colleges were affiliated with these 3 universities. Universities were not the places of imparting education at that point in time. They were the places to test the value of education which was imparted through these colleges. Then rest is the history, because the time is very short, so I would like to. Then we had very tall leaders like Jamsetji Tata, who set up Indian Institute of Science in 1909, Sir Syed Khan, who set up Aligarh Muslim University, Pandit Madan Mohan Malviya, who set up Banaras Hindu University in 1916, similarly Mysore University in 1916. We got independence in 1947, and no sooner had we got independence than we realized that we need to expand and strengthen our higher education. And then the Radhakrishnan Commission was set up, which made a very strong recommendation, among others, that we need to strengthen and expand the existing system of higher education. Soon after that, we realized that we cannot strengthen higher education unless we strengthen the secondary sector. So then we set up Mudaliar Commission in 1952 to look into the issues and concerns of the secondary education. And then again, after 12 long years, we realized that we can't afford to look at education in a disjointed manner. We need to look at education in a holistic manner. And then we set up another commission in 1964 under the chairmanship of Dr. Radhakrishnan. And it was a very comprehensive education commission which made very many vital recommendations. Some of those recommendations are even as relevant today as they were in 1966. If you look into the decadal growth of the Indian higher education system, the first wave of expansion took place in early 60s and early 70s. But unfortunately, that was the time when we fought war with China in 1962, and then subsequently another war in 71 with Bangladesh. We did not have adequate resources available with us to go in for massive expansion of educational facilities. But that was the first wave of expansion when we set up large number of public institutions. The annual growth of enrollment was pretty high. It was as high as 11% because of the swelling aspirations of the youth at that point in time, and most of the people sitting in the audience are the proud product of that era. Then the second decadal, if we look at the second decadal growth, then because of the shortage of resources, we decided to consolidate the initiative of the 64 and 74. And unfortunately, whilst we were consolidating, the annual growth of enrollment dipped down from 11% to 7.5%. And then came the third phase, where when we were preparing the new national policy on education between 1984 to 1994. Then came another era of post-policy interventions from 1994 to 2004. That was the era of liberalization, which started, of course, in 1991. And we introduced a number of quality initiatives. We set up National Assessment and Accreditation Council for the purposes of assessing the performance of individual institutions. We introduced the National Eligibility Test. And we continued in that mode. We opened up the higher education sector to the private service providers. But the second wave of expansion, where we received 9.5 times more resources than the 10th five-year plan, it was the era of the 11th five-year plan, and the size of the plan went up to 85,000 crore. We set up a large number of public institutions, and that was the period which witnessed unprecedented expansion of public institutions in the sector of higher education. We doubled the number of our premier institutions like IITs, IIMs. We set up Indian Institute of Science Education Research, NIPER, and etc. Then, this was also the time when we set up the National Knowledge Commission under the chairmanship of Dr. Sam Pitroda. We also set up another committee under the chairmanship of Professor Yashpal, renovation and rejuvenation of higher education. And the recommendations made by the National Knowledge Commission and by Yashpal committee were almost identical. I mean, they were for making major reforms at the national level. And then we entered into another phase. The economy did not grow like it grew earlier. And then it was decided at the national level that we cannot afford to continue this expansion phase, and therefore let us consolidate the expansion activities. Large number of bills were introduced in the parliament with a view to bringing about reforms in higher education. Of them, the most prominent ones were that of National Commission for Higher Education and Research, National Assessment and Regulatory Authority, NARA Bill, and then Educational Tribunal Bill, then Foreign Educational Providers Bill, and in 2013 we came up with another major reform with a view to strengthening the state universities and state colleges, because bulk of enrollment in our country is with the state system, and we came up with Rashtriya Uchtar Shiksha Abhiyan in 2013. In 2014, we entered into another phase, and we tried to introduce a number of reforms. We set up review committees to review the functioning of the University Grants Commission, to review the functioning of the All India Council for Technical Education. We provided vocational orientation to higher education. For the first time at the national level, we decided to support the community colleges and institutionalization of the bachelor and master's degree in vocational areas. Then some reforms were brought about in teacher preparation programs. We also decided to launch a movement to formulate new policy on education, wherein the government of India came up with the concept note with 13 subjects pertaining to school education and 20 subjects pertaining to higher education. With all this, today we have reached a stage where we have set up a very gigantic system of higher education with 864 degree awarding institutions and 11,000 odd stand-alone institutions which are awarding diploma programs, post-secondary diploma programs, and we have a little over 40,000 colleges offering undergraduate and postgraduate programs. The gross enrollment ratio, if we compare it with the OECD standards, I mean within the age cohort of 18 and 22, we have already reached 29% of the gross enrollment ratio in higher education. But if we take the conventional method of covering the age cohort of 18 to 23, then our gross enrollment ratio is 25.2%. We had started our journey with very limited resources after independence. We were spending only 0.68% of the GDP on education, encompassing all the three sectors: elementary sector, secondary sector, and higher education sector. Today we are spending 4.13% of the GDP on education, of which 1.26% is spent on higher education. And if you split higher education between technical higher education and general higher education, then on general higher education we are spending only 0.68%, and on technical education we are spending 0.58%. We had made a commitment in 1964 that we would be spending 6% of the GDP on education, of which 3% will go for elementary education, 1.5% will go on secondary education, and then 1.5% will go on higher education. We have not been able to realize that goal of ours. But mind you that was the time when we did not have such a gigantic system of education in our country. Today we have more than 15.5 lakhs elementary schools. We have 259,000 secondary schools, and we have about 43,000 higher educational institutions in this country. And if you put the number of teachers together across the sectors, it turns out to be more than 1.27 crore teachers. And the total number of students enrolled across the sectors is about 37 crores. Now, for this kind of humongous numbers, what we need to do today is that we need to compute the resources required for supporting that kind of gigantic system. We still keep talking about 6% of the GDP, I mean, which was talked about when the system was much smaller than what it is today. We have, in spite of doing all this, I mean, there are achievements wherein we can take pride, but we also suffer from a number of inadequacies. Most of our institutions fall in the category of learning system, wherein the knowledge created elsewhere is transmitted and certified. We have a large number of single faculty university. By way of fragmenting higher education, we have done more harm to the sector than doing good. We have regional variations in terms of number of institutions per 100,000 population in terms of gender, social groups, and curricular provisions. None of our institutions is figuring in the global ranking. We have the issues pertaining to skilling. We have, because of the resource constraints, we have privatized higher education on the campuses of public institutions by way of offering so-called self-financing programs. We have a severe shortage of faculty, even in our most premier institutions. And economy is not absorbing the kind of graduates that we are churning out from our campuses. We suffer from autonomy. We are neither seeking autonomy, nor we have graduated ourselves to maintain the autonomy and further that kind of autonomy which is required. We have a large number of unviable institutions. I would close by saying that while the state funding is shrinking, the social aspiration is increasing, and public institutions are involuntarily made to offer self-financing programs. We have frequent cuts in funding of the higher educational institutions. Whatever commitment we make, that commitment is not honored. And the per capita expenditure in higher education varies very widely. If you see the national average, it is only 15,360 rupees. But if you see the per capita expenditure in well-established central universities, it varies from 80,000 to 1,30,000. And if you, I mean, that kind of comparison is not appropriate. Now, we, insofar as economic investment in education is concerned, the question is, where do we put our money to improve the quality of education? That is the big question before us. We need to focus on those aspects of education which can improve the quality of education and help us make effective contribution to understand in-depth conceptual abstract knowledge in concrete form. Therefore, we need to invest more on curriculum designing, updating of syllabi, curriculum transaction, which means the classroom processes. Some of our institutions invest a lot on infrastructural facilities, but they are not spending enough on classroom processes which are of paramount significance. We need to invest on assessment methods. We need to invest on benchmarking in higher education. And benchmarking, not only benchmarking, but benchmarking, subject-specific benchmarking, because today we are not in a position to certify that when a graduate passes out after 3-year successful completion of the program, that he knows A, B, C, or he understands X, Y, Z, or he can perform D, E, F. And it is precisely for that reason that we need to form benchmarking clubs. We can go in for internal benchmarking, we can go in for external benchmarking, we can also go in for collaborative benchmarking. We also need to invest on continued professional development of teachers and their orientation to making them familiar with pedagogies and technologies relevant for teaching and learning. With this, I would like to express my thanks and gratitude for giving me this opportunity by the organizers of this event. And sir, let me once again wish you both very many happy returns of the day. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ved Prakash ji, for that comprehensive history of the growth of the university system.